family member, a friend, a community servant, and somebody who is just an amazing individual to know and to learn and to love. This morning, we're going to explore some of these topics and how they relate to the fraternity, the sorority, and Wava as her life outside of our organization. So many of us never knew that, and we want to make sure that we take the time to learn about that one as well. This morning, we'll have our presenters that are listed on the screen, but we'll start our presentation this morning with Lisa Croston, who's a member of the Board of Trustees for KKPsi Separate, and she heads up their history team and for this sorority. So please be respectful. Thank you all for being here this morning, and I hope you all will get to a glimpse into one of the most wonderful people I've had the privilege of meeting today.
Good morning. How are you all doing this morning? Everybody awake? Yes. It's a half day, so good day. We'll charge through this. Thank you, President Cantley. I've been dying to say that. As he said this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about not only the importance of Wava and fraternity, but we're going to give a brief history of Kappa Sigma in a whole and how we all play together. And to do that, we're going to go back in history a little bit. We're going to go back into the late 30s, 1937 to be exact. And we're going to think at this time, women were just not in the band field. They were not allowed to march. They were not allowed to play. And there was a young woman named Emily Sorrell who approached D.O. Wiley at Texas Tech University. And she was a musician, and she said, why would we not be able to play? And she approached him, and he gave her the opportunity to audition in front of her peers and opened band in Texas Tech. At that time, there was another young woman who was coming up through the ranks and starting Texas Tech, who also wanted to be a band major, which was a big thing in that trade too, because women were not band majors. Yes. That would be smart. And so by the fall of 1938, there were actually 6 girls signed up in the band. But at the insistence of the Dean of Women, Mary Doe, the girls were still not allowed to march. They weren't allowed to wear pants. And at that time, they were not allowed to travel with the band. She found it very unladylike. And she could not abide women participating in that form to be along with the men. The Torador is the campus newspaper that was going around. So this was a big deal in 38. Here were the first 6 women that were actually allowed to be in the marching band, but not allowed to march. And there were many articles that were appearing in the campus newspaper about another group that was coming up and helping with bands at that time. And they were creating such a buzz around the campus because they were starting this thing called a fraternity. Ken and Scott and myself will be jumping back and forth here so that we can kind of give you all the information now of what's going to go on.
So let's flip back in time to the fraternity, which is almost 20 years old at this point in 1938, and the 39th chapter of the fraternity was founded in March 3rd, 1938 at Texas Tech, making this about 41 chapters with 500 members. The chapter was very active, doing great things at Texas Tech, but a thing was happening. It was all-male fraternity, all-male band program. And so one individual called Emily Sorrell approached the director, D.O. Wiley, about being in the band, and he really resisted it for a little bit, but then decided that what was important was letting her audition because he wanted the best players in the band. So he did, and she became a member of the Texas Concert Band, Texas Tech's Concert Band.
Now this woman, she saw this active group and she wanted to be a part of this. She wasn't one to sit on the sidelines, and she wanted to get right there in the middle and do what they were doing, and she wanted to serve. So she approached this group, Alpha Omicron, and wanted to join, but they turned her down because they said it was for men only. Well, that didn't sit very well with this young woman. And as you will learn throughout today, she wasn't one to just sit by and accept no for an answer. So Wava Baines went to DOA, or took two of the women in the band, went off, and they formed their own group, and a tech band sorority was born. They liked that name, so Wava self-proclaimed herself as president because she started this group. So she wrote to the Interfraternity Council to see if anybody had the name Tau Beta Sigma, and it was not. They put an application through to the university to get administrative recognition as a campus group, and they're starting to gain some momentum now. They have about 6 members. They are meeting the first and third Thursday of every month. Their purpose, this is 1939, their purpose is to promote band work among women college students to encourage musical ability and cooperation in musical organizations of college and universities, and to help new members of the band to adjust themselves to new environment when entering college. Still the basic principles that we are living in today. Their officers, which are listed in this picture, were President Wava Baines, who would be on your left, Vice President Emily Sorrell, who was the young woman that approached DOA to join the band, and Lillian Warner was secretary, who was the third woman, and actually was Wava's roommate throughout college. They had a treasurer, Nina Furr, a reporter, Barbara Briggs, and a faculty sponsor was Mrs. DOA. Now, at this point, Emily and Wava graduated in 1940, but Wava still lived in Lubbock for a while and continued to help the girls along for another couple of years. And in 1941, she married that Alpha Omicron president that helped the chapter soon get started on campus, Mr. Jack Turner.
Let's set the stage a little bit. What we're going to, in the next few minutes, we're going to be talking over a period of about 6 years. And it's important to understand a few things about that time period. There was no Facebook, there was no email, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever. None of that. Basically, how business was done with KKPsi at the time is everything was done by letter. And so it took some time. And as you'll see is over the next few slides, things move at a snail's pace. Once in a while, if there was an emergency, you could send a telegram, which was still a lot slower than what we deal with today. But the way the fraternity did business is we had some national leaders, and we're going to talk about some of these key players. The fraternity paid a small stipend to A. Frank Martin, who was the Grand Executive Secretary and one of the founding members, and the national office was in A. Frank's home in Stillwater in his garage. So that kind of gives you a feel for the type of organization we're dealing with at the time. Now, the key players also understand, too, that this is just before World War II. So the fraternity in 1941 had their 10th biennial convention at Oregon State University, and that was the last time they did official business as a national delegation like we are here today. All right, at the time when all this conversation was starting to begin with Wava and the girls at Texas Tech, F. Lee Bowling was the national president. Okay, and then of course we had our founder, William Strauss. He was the first Grand Vice President and the expansion officer, so obviously he's a key player in determining whether or not this other organization and what relationship they have with KKPsi at the time. All right, then we also have Max Mitchell. He was the second Grand Vice President at the time when all this begins. He goes on to become a member of the Board of Trustees. He ends up becoming the National President in 1947-49. And Mitchell, as you see here, he gave all aid possible towards helping Tau Beta Sigma become a national organization. And he devoted the meeting and social educational needs from the college and university perspective. And then also was Ted Jones, who was the Secretary-Treasurer at the time. A. Frank Martin, I already mentioned, he was the Executive Secretary, and he is really the key component, as you'll see over the next few slides. And then, of course, our guiding spirit, Bo Makovsky. Now, remember also that when this started, these guys, these key players, if you will, were really critical to the foundation and the formation of the sorority, and the fact that, remember, they'd been there, done that. They had just gone through this about 17 years earlier, 20 years earlier, so that's why they played a key role, and that's why the Texas Tech organization went to them to discuss this further.
So a lot of this history book and presentations and materials that I've put together through all this was based on a group of letters that in 1987 National Convention, the Texas Tech, the Beta chapter, found a group of letters stuck in a box down in their basement. They put these letters together and they presented them to Wava at that 1987 National Convention. And so this, what we're entering now, and what you see here, is basically the first letter that we find and what's kind of sparked all of this history. So in 41, we had just ended the previous National Convention for KKPsi. There was a little bit of talk about that Texas local club that was at Texas Tech, but there was another big musical event that happened in Oklahoma every year called Tri-State Music Festival. And D.O. Wiley and A. Frank Martin and Bo and all of the key band directors always attended this. So by piecing together some correspondence throughout the year, that's where we think during this meeting or during a meeting in Oklahoma City, that's what truly sparked all of the interest in the girls, asking for help. Hey, what do we need to do to, be a part of you or to help, get to your stature? So that's what starts this letter. It's in October of 41. This is basically their response to A. Frank Martin saying, well, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you're doing. So what this letter says is, she is now the president. She becomes the president for the next 2 years of this local girls club. And she summarizes the accomplishments that they've been doing since 1939. And they have been working on a constitution, they've been working on a pen, they've been working on a coat of arms. They picked a flower, they picked colors, they picked a motto. They had no ritual, they had no password or pledge pen, so they were requesting help with that. And at this time, they wanted to tie into the coat of arms. They had a pen work, but they wanted to tie all that into this ritual work. They were also requesting any suggestion from him on how to incorporate. So A. Frank Martin said, sure, I'll help you. This is something great. I just helped. We just started KKPsi. I can help you. But at this time, it sparked him, as he sat down and tried to think how he can help them with a ritual or a constitution. He said, well, how are we going to do this? Are you going to be a group all your own? Or is this something we can better align ourselves? Would you rather be organized as national as a separate unit? In this case, we'd have to outline a separate process, and that would be a very long process. Or we could ask the powers of incorporation of KKPsi in Oklahoma City if you could be an auxiliary unit of KKPsi, which would be a separate organization, that you would still be the same entity. I don't know if most of you are familiar with fraternal organizations like the Elks Lodge or the Moose Lodge or these kind of things, but they have the women of the Moose or the Lady Elks, which they are all part of the same concept, that they are two separate entities. And so after conversations with both, these are two quotes. One, he sent the quote to Alpha Omicron chapter, saying, your group at Lubbock has started something here, and it's starting to spread. And then he's also telling Barbara Briggs that he's really excited about them, and that you're going to start this movement, and this is going to be awesome. But which way do you want to go? And it was unanimously decided that to align themselves with KKPsi and be an auxiliary unit. So he said, great, let's get me an article, for the baton. I'm getting ready to publish that. So they wrote up an article for the baton. They, the picture on your right is the Raventana, which is the campus yearbook at Texas Tech. So they are filing an official group now. They've been published in the baton. They've been published in the Raventana. And by the end of the 1941-42 school year, it really advanced the movement of this local sorority. They were increasing in membership and responsibilities. They began thinking of incorporation. They officially get recognized on campus. And A. Frank Martin begins formalizing the ritual and constitution, and Octavianism is published. Things are really progressing well.
Unfortunately, the war had a decimating effect on the fraternity. You can see as the war progressed, the number of chapters and number of members declined dramatically. As you can see, there was really nothing left of the fraternity but 7 chapters by the end of the war. And because of the war, it had a dramatic effect on the major decisions to create Kappa Sigma.
So let's move forward. The war has started, and we're in spring of 1942. And at this point, A. Frank Martin wants to seek approval from the KKPsi Grand Council to submit an actual amendment to the KKPsi's Constitution. As because of the war and the fact that most chapters, at the time we only had by the end of the war, we only had 5 active chapters. So most of the business was done through the Grand Council. Initially, our founder, Scroggs, was against any kind of amendment. So what Martin wanted to do was have that amendment basically codify the fact that, okay, they're going to be an auxiliary unit of the fraternity. So ultimately, another important thing to remember is it fair to say in your own chapters, maybe sometimes there's some drama? And is it fair to say that sometimes maybe some of your leaders within the organization butt heads? Well, A. Frank Martin and William Scroggs had a lifelong feud, and they never really got along. So they were always butting heads, and this lasted throughout generations, actually. But that's another story for another presentation. But it's important to understand that these two are always going at each other. Well, Scroggs was against this, and the way A. Frank Martin proceeded. But ultimately, he said, look, I will do this on one condition. I don't agree with doing this auxiliary unit. I think they should be a separate organization. But I ultimately feel like our national chapter, the delegation, should be the ones to decide this. So I have no problem with the amendment as long as you include a letter, A. Frank, from me that says why I don't think this is a good idea. So ultimately, Scroggs says, although I'm opposed to such a sponsorship on the part of the fraternity, at least during these trying times, if not for all time, I am not opposed to allowing the chapters the privilege of voting their ideas regarding this matter. So ultimately, Martin proceeds, and he also has a discussion with the Oklahoma Corporation Commission to see if this is going to create any trouble from the Articles of Incorporation. Ultimately, they come back and they say, we believe if we were you, you should continue to operate as you have done in the past, and then go ahead and organize your auxiliary unit as you have outlined to me without amending your Articles of Incorporation. The purpose of this clause just basically confines your organization to boys. So at this point, Martin does go ahead and advise Barbara Griggs at Texas Tech that they're proceeding with, on the KKPsi side of things, with the amendment and sending this out again via mail, a ballot to ratify the auxiliary unit.
So you can see the constitutional change that was mailed out on January 8th. It gave them roughly a month to send it back, again, all by mail. Basically, the constitutional amendment would be authorized to give the Grand Council the authority to establish auxiliary units of KKPsi. And so by adopting the amendment, it keeps the power and control of the auxiliaries within the fraternity and in the hands of the Grand Council until such time as the National Convention sets up proper procedures for the future. They can guide the destiny of these organizations through a trial period like our colonization process now, He explains that the groups as Texas Tech, Oklahoma University, and Stetson have all operated for over 2 years now and have proven themselves that they could easily be granted charters now.
So the results come back, and you can see that there was no opposition. We had 24 chapters at the time. Now remember, I told you that Straug's condition on this amendment was that he have a letter sent expressing his views. Well, it just so happened that A. Frank Martin forgot to include the letter with the ballot. So, needless to say, Scroggs wasn't happy with A. Frank, and so he sent a letter indicating, and this is in May 1942, once again expressing his views, and he chastised A. Frank for not sending the letter to the chapters. And then Scroggs sends a letter to Grand Presidents Bowling and said, the amendment shouldn't even be accepted because the conditions of the amendment were not met. And he also said that, well, Ted Jones is in agreement with it. So Bowling ultimately says, under no condition will I recall this or any other vote unless it is the desire of the majority of the Grand Council. So now Bowling is putting it back to the Council to see if we should recall this whole amendment. What's the bottom line, though? Once again, this organization at Texas Tech, it's been 3 years and they're still waiting. And that seems to be the general theme as we go on, is wait, wait, wait. So this is the letter that Scroggs wanted included in with the amendment that never got sent by A. Frank. But ultimately, without going into a lot of detail, his reasoning for not proceeding is he didn't feel like the fraternity had a lot of money to undertake such an item, and he really felt like the sorority should be a separate organization.
So throughout all this waiting, we now begin a new school year in 43. They elect a new president, Betty Grace Pugh, and she will become the next president for the next 2 years of this local organization. Also during this time, in about these 4 years, just as a side note, they received several letters from all sorts of girls groups forming and hearing about them across the country. Kind of like KKPsi Separate by students of Bow and the band network field. That was the same kind of thing. D.O. Wiley's colleagues knew that women were becoming a big force in the band, so of course they needed to fill that void and started working. So everybody would write the girls at Texas Tech, and they were moving along. In a letter that Betty wrote to Frank Martin in 1943, she says, with the decreasing number of KKPsi members on the campus, we feel that it is becoming more and more the duty of Tau Beta Sigma to carry on our purpose and to help in bringing about an increase in girls' band work. I am happy to say that there are several entering women students majoring in it this year, which is a big thing. A. Frank Martin asked the Texas Tech girls if they'd like to petition KKPsi to join as an auxiliary unit, as the amendment for the previous semester did pass, and they're now able to issue charters to women's group. The other option advanced is to remain a local club if they wanted. If they decided to petition, they would need to put together a formal petitioning document and submit it to the Grand Council. Martin stated his belief that Tech should be given the opportunity to present the first petition, since they were the first to start an active part in such an organization. If the Grand Council accepts the petition, their chapter would then become the alpha chapter of the national organization. And at this point, this is the first correspondence they've had since February, and at least as far as we know, So when they start putting together this, and they think this is great, we're going to petition this, but because they've reached so much correspondence from other girls groups, their question then was, when the girls in the band get together to form the sorority, they intended it to be an independent organization, but there were various reasons why they had to seek outside advice. They were very proud of their work, and they didn't want to change it. They wanted to maintain their originality. So since they had several requests from these different colleges, and several of them were women's colleges, they were asking the question that if we're going to petition with KKPsi, which is great, what about these schools where there were women groups and no KKPsi? Would they be able to join?
So A. Frank Martin sends a letter to his colleagues and says, I have one suggestion that we take some definitive action now. It is a serious proposition, and if they start a national organization, we will have the keenest competition that any fraternity has ever had, because they will open their own chapters by granting both boys and girls the opportunities to belong to the organization. They will put chapters where we cannot think of putting chapters. We might as well face the facts which are in front of us. The smaller schools are 50-50 in membership, and it is a question of whether we want to be of service to bands and meet the new situation, and whether we will hold our tradition and be the half of our chapter. Again, the fraternity is delaying all of this, and he is told to keep the girls calm.
So in March 30, 1944, it was decided that A. Frank Martin go up with the original intention of slowing down the girls. The whole theme was they need to wait until the war's over and until our boys come back from the war and meet as a group. So amongst some dissension, they decided to send A. Frank Martin to the girls at Texas Tech and sit down and just kind of see what their intentions are and go. A. Frank Martin kind of had a little different plan. He decided that while he was there, they're going to really hash out and lay down the foundation for what was going to be a groundbreaking event. So he leaves Stillwater by bus at 4 a.m. on the 29th to arrive in Ludwig at 7 p.m. You talk about a road trip, right? He spends 3 days with the local girls and talks about all their concerns and answers their questions. Then he meets with the dean of women, he meets with the band director, he meets with all the campus administration. And they get together and to work on their petition, and they decide that they are going to petition KKPsi. I'm going to at this time they did have 100 members in their band, 43 of which were girls. So they had 14 active members. They had several alumni that were helping them out, and 8 candidates coming through. They sat down and laid out a 14-point plan, which we're just going to briefly run through these. That they would be the founding chapter, that a charter would be granted at every local girls organization where there was a KKPsi. They would be required to submit a petition, that they would pay $25 dues plus $3 membership fee, have a place in all publications, hold a national convention at the same time, that they would operate as a local apart from KKPsi. They would amend their national constitution to create an advisory committee, which consisted of the president of Kappa Sigma, the president of KKPsi, and the director of bands. That all KKPsi chapters and the director of band must endorse the local chapter of Kappa Sigma before petition would be accepted. They would provide sufficient proof that 2 organizations would work together in harmony for the welfare of the band. That A. Frank Martin would prepare and copy a complete ritual. They design a crest and pin to be made by Wava. They change all reports, blanks, and charters to read Kappa Sigma of KKPsi, and all records will be kept at the national headquarters.
So they've gone through all this. A. Frank has worked with them diligently. They have everything put together, and the girls get together and putting together the actual petition, which you see a copy of in front of you. It's June 9th, 1944, and the official petition arrives at the national office, A. Frank's home. So A. Frank sends a letter to the Grand Council and said, look, it's time to get moving. We've got the petition, and I advise you that you need to act at this point. Well, remember, the council didn't tell A. Frank to do all this. He wanted to keep the girls calm. They wanted to keep the girls calm. Well, they were furious. And so there was a heated debate, and there was dissension within the Grand Council. They couldn't decide what to do. They couldn't come to any kind of conclusion. So they ultimately said, this is silly to continue to discuss this amongst ourselves. Let's send it to the board. they said, let's let Bo and Francis Todd tell us what to do. And at the time, the board comprised of 3 members. It was Bo, Francis Todd, and Max Mitchell. So the board gets together and has a discussion, and ultimately, now remember again, this is 6 years these girls have been waiting to get this thing off the ground, and the board votes 2-1 to not pursue expansion at this time, after all that work. So they get back to, they tell A. Frank to tell the ladies that they will return the money, and they'll just have to wait until the end of the war to see what they want to do next. Well, A. Frank was devastated because obviously he was very passionate about this group, and he met with them several times. And he writes, "I know that this is quite a blow to you young ladies because it has literally taken the heart out of me, and I am blamed severely for my action in this matter. In other words, it would be difficult to tell just the position that I've been placed in had I known that the result of my going to Texas Tech and conferring with you people would have brought about such a misunderstanding and placed me in the position that it has. And I want to assure you, I know that perhaps some of your members will feel badly towards me, and that what I've done is because I felt strongly about this." At this point, we really lose a lot of correspondence, so it's difficult to understand what happened next, but the ultimate point is that we have to wait some more.
Right, so when we lose our correspondence and really can't do that, I create the whole scenario in my head based upon what information I do have. So in my head, I'm thinking they go back to this Tri-State Music Festival. It's been about a year that we really see anything. A. Frank Martin just doesn't like this. These girls are really out there working their group and wanting to be nationalized. He's getting calls or letters every day from other girl groups, and at this time the war is winding down and getting ready to end, and things are just not progressing the way he wants. So he calls D.O. Wiley and says, "Why don't you just go on your own group? Why don't you go national? Quit waiting on us. We're not getting anywhere." And so through some discussions, it looks like that's what they're going to do. But when they look into the corporation laws, with Texas and with Oklahoma, that's great if they want to form in Texas Tech. If they did that and were a separate group, then they just couldn't have any help at all from A. Frank Martin. They would just turn it all over. Their organization would have to be at Texas Tech or in Texas. And they didn't think they could do this at that time because they wanted to align themselves with KKPsi. They wanted to have shared publications. They wanted to do all that. They didn't think financially or soundly that they could do it all on their own and start from scratch and build constitutions and build a ritual and build this foundation up in these times. So they decided to incorporate in Oklahoma. They surrendered all of their documents to a local group of girls that was being founded there at Oklahoma A&M College called the KKPsi Club. And in March 26, 1946, March 26, 1946, they went to the state of Oklahoma and incorporated Chi Beta Sigma National Honor Band sorority. So at this time they traveled. A. Frank Martin finished the ritual. They performed the ritual for the local group. They actually installed the Delta chapter at Oklahoma University next. And on May 5th, 1946, they traveled to Lubbock, and the 4 groups that had already been very active during this time, which was University of Colorado, the Gamma chapter, Texas Tech, Delta chapter, and Alpha chapter at Oklahoma State University, they sat down and held their first national convention on May 5th. They elected national officers, they adopted the national constitution, they adopted the ritual, they adopted the ring and all jewelry, they adopted the membership certificates, crests, and membership cards. They decided that the next convention was to be held in conjunction with KKPsi, and they approved sharing publications at a prorated status. Am I good? Okay. So then the next year, KKPsi set their date for their first national convention since 1941. It was to be held in Stillwater at Oklahoma A&M College, and unanimously, the KKPsi delegates officially voted to accept Chi Beta Sigma as a sister organization of the fraternity and offered this new organization the privilege of sharing all fraternal publications, the national office operations, staff personnel, and other fraternal programs. So at this time, I know we're moving. We have the distinct pleasure of having with us this weekend Wava's daughter, Sandra Weasley. And so that was a little bit about the organization, which all was sparked by this woman with Spitfire that sat there and said, I'm not going to take no, and I'm going to start a group. So Sandra's now going to come and tell you a little bit about the Spitfire and what kind of woman she was and how her passion and her growth pretty much sparked this. So please give your time to Sandra and let's get to know Wava just a little bit.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello, everyone. My name is Sandra, and I'm Wava's daughter.
Just to let you know, Wava, or Kappa and KKPsi was always Wava's dirty little secret. Her family knew that there was this sorority thing, and she's going to tell you all about this. But it wasn't until this convention, she came a little bit in 2001, that they had no idea this impact and what we've grown to. So this is major overwhelming for a person to step in and go, that was my mother. You're going to hear thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, that was my mother. I had a really incredible and unusual situation happen when my mother was passing away. And anybody that knew her knew that she did things on her terms, and she was very diligent and very planning of things. And so she did with her passing. I had an opportunity to just look at her at a time and like, who is this woman really? I mean, I've known her my whole life, of course, but do I really, really know this woman? And one night before, about maybe a week before she passed away, I was just looking at her all night long. I held her hand and I just looked at her. And I'm like, okay, where was she born? Who was she? What did she like? What was her passions? And are there any questions that I want to ask her that I know that I'll never probably have another opportunity to do? My mom was born in Cleveland, Oklahoma in 1920. She went to Wink High School. And she moved from Wink to Lubbock, I think probably, she moved from Oklahoma to Wink at a time in high school that she was supposed to be valedictorian, but something happened because she wasn't in the high school the whole entire time, and so they passed her over on that, and of course that didn't stop her. And when she graduated from Wink High School at the age of 16, she was going off to college. And what she did was that she just got on a bus from Wink to go to Lubbock, to Texas Tech, walked in the registrar's office and said, I'm here to go to school. And they looked at her like, okay, who are you? And she goes, well, I'm Wava Baines, and I'm here to go to school. And she goes, well, we don't have any paperwork. Well, I don't know. I didn't know that you needed paperwork. So she said, I've got my high school class ring. Isn't that good enough? And we're like, no, but okay, well, we'll work on it. So, of course, they let her into school. And then they just worked out the paperwork later. She was the first female to graduate from Texas Tech with a band director's degree. At that time, like what has been said with Lisa, is that women just did not play a part at all in the band or band directing or playing. And she was able to overcome that and really make her mark in Lubbock and Texas Tech in the music department. After she graduated from college, which actually she did meet her husband, which was my dad, Jack Turner, at Texas Tech, and he was actually a charter member of KKPsi at Texas Tech. And they fell in love, got married, life happened, and they owned a cafe in Lubbock. And my dad made burgers and my mom made pies. And during this time, when I was watching her that night, holding her hand, I'm like, how in the world did my mother ever start making pies? Because she was a music person and an educator in college, and how did she ever do that? And come to find out, she did that because my grandmother, her mother, made pies. And she learned how to make pies from her grandmother, or from her mother, and my dad's mother. But I never knew how she got into the cafe. And that was one question I never did really find out, is how did she do the cafe? Well, apparently my grandmother, back in the day, they lived on oil land, and my grandfather was just a maintenance person on oil rigs. And my grandmother had a cafe that was on the oil fields, and that's how that happened. And I didn't even find that out till I talked to my cousin about that. So there's always new things that you find out. My mom absolutely loved her husband, Jack. Jack passed away in 1959, and that absolutely devastated my mother. Jack was the love of her life, and they just loved each other, and they were married for quite a while, actually, before he passed away. Well, being the person that my mom was, that of course didn't stop her too long, and she picked herself up and went back to school and got a degree in education. She taught elementary school in Lubbock, Texas for a while. Then after, I don't know, a couple, 3 years, she was invited to go to Colorado, to Aspen, Colorado, with some friends, and she went. And in 1961, we were in the grocery store, and the superintendent of schools came up to her and said, do you want a job? She goes, well, okay. I could get out of Texas and come to Colorado, and so she accepted the position. She taught math in middle school. She taught 8th grade math. She also was one of the founding people of outdoor education, which was a program in the Aspen School Districts that got 8th graders outdoors and into the wilderness and did camping and hiking and just wilderness activities and obstacle courses. And she was very instrumental in developing that program, and which is actually still going on today. In 1973, after I graduated from high school, she went to the high school. And she was the guidance counselor at Aspen High School from 1973 until she retired in 1980. And her impact on people was huge in that part of her life and being a counselor. She was very, very good at it. One thing that I do remember is that my mom was always very, there was always people around. We had parties. She socialized. We did things with the teachers. We did things with the students. She was very outgoing and just very, very full of life. But she never really dated anybody after my dad died. It was just my mom and me. I mean, I'm an only child, and it was just my mom and me. And in 1979, I had moved away. She had known this man for quite a while, but she met Reese Henry, and they were married in 1981. After that, she retired from teaching, and she and Reese just started traveling. She was a world traveler. She went all over the world. She went to China, Russia. She went from, yeah, that's my favorite picture. That is her. That's after an outdoor education situation. She went to Europe. She went to Africa. She went to the Galapagos. And one thing that she'd always say when we got back, it's like, well, I don't need to go back there. But she did always want to go back to, she wanted to go back to Africa or the Galapagos. Family, Pi Beta Sigma, football, and golf were her passion. She absolutely loved her family. This is a picture of my daughter and her at a horse show. That she went to every one of my daughter's horse shows, and she just supported her. She just loved her grandchildren. She just loved her great-grandchildren. But she also loved you. I remember she would come back from a national convention, and the kids are this, and the kids are that, and the kids made me this, and the kids made me that, and there was just stuff all over her house of things, of blankets that people had made, and cards that were sent, and roses that would come, and she absolutely loved you. It's Reese. She has football. Then the family. Football was her life also. And being in Texas, that was one big part of who you are in Texas is football. And she was a huge football fan. And she was also quite the golfer. She loved playing golf. In fact, last time that she played with my husband, she sure showed him how to correct his swing. And she did not mind telling us how to play. Up until the time that she was 90 years old, she was still telling us how to play. She had a profound impact on people in her life. The words that come to my mind are survival, strong, larger than life. One of the things that she would say is that I don't want to get bitchy when I grow old. And she didn't get bitchy. She would order people around quite a bit, but we wouldn't really call it bitchy. When I need some advice, she would say, just hang in there, we'll get through it. Just hang in there, we'll get through it. And we always did. We always got through it. We always hung in there. And she always hung in there. But one of my favorites is that, I want to change it before I say this. No, not that one either. There. I don't know if this is real apropos either, but if you hang around shitty people, you'll get some on you. And that was one of her favorite things to say. And I'm not saying that those people are shitty that she's hanging around with right there, but that was one of her favorite things. She did not want to get bitchy, and she didn't. She didn't want to hang around shitty people because she didn't want to get any on her, and she didn't. And she just hung in there. And when I did the memorial for her in May in Aspen, I worked for, well, she died October 16th, 2012. And we had the memorial in May. And I wrote some things down and I just could not get a closure. I couldn't put an end stamp to the talk. I don't know how to just say, okay, we're done. So how I ended it in Aspen and how I want to end it today is that if you hang around shitty people, you get some on you. That's all. That's all I can say. There's no closure. There's no end dot. Just know that her presence is here with us today at this convention. One of the last trips that she made was to the convention in Colorado Springs in 2011. The family was there. We were there. She just had a wonderful, wonderful time. She loved all of you. And actually, when we left there, she was like, you know, I think I'm going to hang on for a couple more years, and I'm going to make it to Massachusetts. And we tried everything we could to get her to come, but she had other plans. She was ready to go. She was tired. She lived a large, large life. And, you know, I have to be okay with that. that she just, when she went, she went. And with that, I will close, and thank you so much for having us. Thank you for being such a part of her life, and now a part of my life, and my husband, and my family. We're family, and I love each and every one of you, and thank you so much.